When LeBron passes up Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in points, and he will this year, will that make him the greatest player? An interesting question. I think the greatest player is Michael Jordan.
Shaquille O'Neal has always been blunt about who he respects. Whether it was a teammate who showed up in the playoffs or an opponent who didn't back down, he kept a mental list. Some earned it with toughness, others earned it with skill. A few had both. These are the 7 players who, according to Shaq himself, stood to, beginning with Michael Jordan. That's Shaquille O'Neal. No hesitation, no debate, just his pick. On record. And not for the first time. Shaq has said it before, Jordan's the standard. Not just because of the rings, not just because of the scoring titles, but because Jordan beat everybody, including him.
I take pride in being the last guy to beat Michael Jordan.
That came in 1995 when the Magic bounced Chicago in the second round. Jordan had just come back from baseball. He wasn't fully MJ again. But even still, Shaq never forgot it. Because the very next year, Jordan came back different, better, stronger. The Bulls swept Orlando in the '96 conference finals like they'd never lost. And after that final game, Jordan pulled Shaq aside and told him something that would stay with him for the rest of his life.
He grabs me and says, before you succeed, you must first learn to fail.
Because at that moment, he realized something. Jordan didn't just compete, he set the terms. He destroyed you, and then he explained why. Years later, in interviews, Shaq still tells the same story. Still calls Jordan the best to ever do it.
Is he the best to ever play the game?
Oh, yeah.
It's not a debate to him. And for all the noise about LeBron's scoring record, Shaq doesn't flinch. He's made it clear, stats alone don't do it. Not in this case. It's about dominance, presence, fear. Jordan had that. He broke teams before the game even tipped off. That's why he's at the top of Shaq's list. However, if you ask Shaq about his current favorite player, you'll always hear Steph Curry.
Start putting Steph Curry in that greatest of all time conversation.
That was Shaquille O'Neal speaking on live television, without hesitation or pushback. No qualifiers, no joking tone, just a clear statement about where he sees Curry now. It's not a typical endorsement from a center who dominated through physicality. Shaq has always valued control of the paint, rebounding, and high-efficiency scoring at the rim. Curry represents a different type of dominance, built around range, movement, and timing. And yet, Shaq not only respects it, he embraces it. Curry's career arc doesn't follow the usual MVP script. He came into the league undersized, often dismissed for his defense and durability. Over time, he developed into the central figure behind 4 championships and 2 MVP awards, one of them unanimous. That distinction, the only one of its kind in league history, carries weight in how Shaq assesses impact. He said before that if he played alongside Curry, he'd average 60 points per game. That wasn't exaggeration. Shaq sees how Curry's shooting stretches the floor, pulls big men out of the paint, and opens lanes. For someone who spent his career bulldozing through collapsed defenses, the thought of playing with Curry's gravity is more than appealing. It's actually strategic. Later, on a separate episode of Inside the NBA, Kenny Smith challenged him.
You yourself put Steph Curry over you.
Yeah.
It's a rare admission from someone who typically places himself near or at the top of every list. But the reason is clear. Shaq doesn't just look at points or accolades, he evaluates what it takes to force an entire league to change. Curry did that. He altered how teams space the floor, how they guard screens, and how they construct rosters. Shaq watched it happen in real time and never dismissed it as a fad. That respect, coming from one of the most physically dominant players in league history, says more than a ranking ever could. For Shaq, Curry's value comes from the way he controls tempo and creates advantages without ever needing to overpower anyone physically. That's not about highlight reels, it's about results. The next name might surprise some, not others. There's a reason Shaquille O'Neal never stopped talking about David Robinson. For years, he told the story of a young Shaq getting snubbed by Robinson for an autograph, fueling a personal grudge that turned every Spurs matchup into something bigger than basketball.
That he stiffed you for an autograph when you were a kid.
Ernie Johnson famously asked Shaq on a special segment of an Inside the NBA. Shaq just laughed and brushed it off.
This is not true.
It's not true. I made it all up.
The story was never real, and that was the point. Shaq didn't need David Robinson to snub him as a kid, he just needed something to fuel him. Years later, he admitted on air that the autograph story was fake. The truth was much simpler. Shaq watched all of that closely. He saw a model of how to be a star without acting like one. That was worth more than stats or awards.
David Robinson is my favorite player ever. I love David Robinson.
That statement carried more weight than any fictional slight. Shaq respected Robinson's skill, but what really stayed with him was how he handled the role. Robinson led without chasing attention. He dominated without ego. He treated the game and the people around it with discipline.
I loved him so much that I had to make up a fake story.
That time, Shaq wasn't just saying silly stuff to get laughs, as he tends to do. Shaq was revealing exactly how much Robinson had shaped the way he approached greatness. If David Robinson gave Shaq a model to follow, the one who exposed every gap in his game was Hakeem Olajuwon. The first real challenge of Shaq's career came in the 1995 Finals, when the Rockets swept the Magic in 4 games. Shaq was younger, stronger, and more athletic. It didn't matter. He was outplayed at every turn.
You know, he was the first guy to actually embarrass me.
Hakeem didn't need to talk or show off. He controlled the game through precision, not theatrics. Shaq would later recall that, at that point, Hakeem was pretty much everything he wasn't.
Hakeem Olajuwon had everything.
Footwork, timing, counters, nothing repeated, nothing rushed. Every possession was a new problem, and Shaq had no solution.
Hakeem, he was very unpredictable on the block.
The gap wasn't physical. Shaq came into the league as an athletic specimen. There weren't many more athletically talented players in NBA history. With Hakeem, the gap was mental. Shaq had already bullied his way through most of the league by that point, but Hakeem never gave him the chance. He'd catch the ball, fake left, turn right, pivot again, and finish before Shaq could react. The numbers weren't lopsided, but the feeling was. One looked in control, the other looked inexperienced. Shaq later admitted that he studied Hakeem's game in film sessions after the loss. He didn't try to copy the moves, but he learned from the tempo, the discipline, and the patience. His own post-game evolved, less rushing, more counters, better spacing. Years later, whenever Shaq was asked about the best centers of all time, he consistently named Hakeem near the top. The respect didn't fade with time or with accolades. It was set early, and it stuck. Shaquille O'Neal dominated most matchups by force. Guards rarely challenged him, but not many guards are Allen Iverson. In the 2001 NBA Finals, the Lakers were expected to sweep. They had won 11 straight playoff games. The Sixers weren't supposed to compete, but in Game 1, Iverson walked into Staples Center and scored 48 points. The Sixers won in overtime. It didn't shift the series, but it changed the tone. Shaq kept his dominance intact, 33 points, 15 rebounds, 57% from the field, but something about Iverson stayed with him.
He's probably one of the only guys I couldn't pump.
Iverson didn't avoid screens or reroute his drives. He kept attacking the rim, even with Shaq waiting inside. His durability, pace, and intensity pushed defenders into foul trouble and made his size irrelevant. Shaq recognized it in real time and respected how Iverson handled pressure.
Iverson is one of the greatest players to ever play the game. He's on top.
That assessment never changed. Shaq continued to mention Iverson in interviews, even when asked about players at other positions. He valued effort and fearlessness more than frame or numbers. Iverson had both. He stayed upright through contact, played long minutes, and didn't rely on excuses. Iverson's view of Shaq matched the respect. They didn't need a rivalry to earn each other's respect. The finals were enough. Both understood what it meant to carry a roster through effort alone. Shaq never ranked Iverson based on position. He put him with the toughest players he faced because that's where he belonged. While he butted heads with Kobe Bryant, Shaq still ended up respecting him more than any other Laker. Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant shared 8 seasons, 3 championships, and a long list of conflicts. Their partnership wasn't built on harmony. It worked because both were relentless and neither wanted to be second. When Kobe entered the league in 1996, he was 17 years old and already trying to prove something. Shaq was in his prime and had just signed with the Lakers. From the start, their dynamic was unstable, but it produced results. Between 2000 and 2002, they won 3 straight titles and redefined how dominant a duo could be. The internal tension was real, public comments, missed passes, off-season jabs, but Shaq never denied what Kobe brought to the team. Behind the arguments, he saw the hours in the gym, the film sessions, and the consistency under pressure. He acknowledged it plainly. Shaq didn't talk about Kobe's work ethic in abstract terms. He had seen it up close for nearly a decade. The competitiveness wasn't secondhand. It came from full practices, playoff games, and championship runs where Kobe refused to let tempo drop. He set the rhythm for the team and never slowed down. The public feud that followed them through the early 2000s was real, but both players admitted later that it could have been handled differently. That didn't change the outcome, but it did clarify the context. The issues weren't about respect, they were about control. Shaq often brought Kobe's name into unrelated conversations. It didn't matter who the question was about. At some point, the discussion shifted back to Kobe.
Mr. Bean? Who? Mr. Kobe Bean's not in that conversation?
That wasn't an isolated moment. Shaq made a habit of reminding people what he saw behind the scenes. He rarely let the narrative move on without including Kobe's name. The opinion was consistent across interviews.
Kobe is the greatest Laker ever.
That line carried weight from someone who played with Magic Johnson in All-Star games and wore the same uniform as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. For Shaq, the numbers didn't need to be adjusted. The player he had shared a dynasty with had done more than hold his own. He had carried the franchise after Shaq left and won 2 more titles doing it his way. The last name on the list will definitely surprise you. How many of you expected to hear the name Dave Bing? Well, you just heard it. Let's explain why puts Dave Bing on his list. Over the years, Shaq built more than a basketball legacy. He signed endorsement deals with Reebok, Pepsi, Icy Hot, Buick, and the General. He's owned car washes, restaurants, gyms, and real estate across multiple states. By the time he retired, he was already a multi-millionaire investor with a portfolio stretching well beyond the court. That mindset didn't come from nowhere. Shaq credits his approach to business and post-career planning to the example set by one player in particular, someone who didn't show up on most people's lists of childhood idols. People sometimes ask me who is my favorite athlete. They expect me to say Chamberlain, Russell, Kareem, Shaq said. But I say Dave Bing because he did great things after basketball. Bing played 9 seasons with the Detroit Pistons, made 7 All-Star teams, and won Rookie of the Year in 1967. He once led the league in scoring and finished his career with over 18,000 points. On the court, he was one of the smoothest guards of his era, quick, balanced, and composed. But that's not what stuck with Shaq. After basketball, Bing started a steel company from scratch in Detroit. He grew it into a multi-million-dollar operation and became one of the most respected black business leaders in the country. Then, in 2009, he was elected mayor of Detroit during one of the city's most difficult periods. He didn't rely on popularity or nostalgia. He ran on stability, and he governed through crisis. Shaq paid attention to all of it. To him, Bing wasn't just a great player. He was proof that an athlete could lead in a completely different arena. While others admired titles or highlight reels, Shaq admired long-term stability. Bing showed what that looked like. Not with speeches, but with payrolls, policies, and results. That's what made him Shaq's favorite. Not the play style, stats, or raw strength, but the model. If you made it this far, you already know Shaq doesn't hand out praise for nothing. These weren't just highlight reel favorites. They were the guys who earned his respect by showing up, battling back, and doing it their way. If you want more lists like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let us know who you'd put on your list.